Japan, late Edo period. The sakura was in full bloom, scattering soft pink petals across the stone courtyard of the Nakamura estate. The sky above Kyoto was washed in the clear, milky blue of spring, and the distant mountains wore a haze like breath on silk. Carps glided lazily through the garden pond, and a breeze carried the scent of plum blossoms and sea salt inland from the port. It was the kind of day poets remembered. Emi Nakamura, youngest daughter of the wealthy silk merchant Genbei Nakamura, moved through the shadows of the Endoa like a petal in the wind, her white-sleeved kimono trailing behind her. At 17, she was quiet, mild, and seldom noticed, especially next to her elder sister Essie, the prized beauty of the family. Essie's every step was measured, every word practiced. Emi preferred books, her mother's garden, and watching the ships in the harbor where silk, silver, and incense were exchanged for strange, glittering things from far-off coasts. It was on one of those late summer days, as her father received foreign traders in their formal hall, that Emi saw him for the first time. His name was Timibra, son of a wealthy African trader from the coast of the Bight of Benin. He had come with his father to trade furs, ivory, and gold-threaded beads for Genbei's finest silks. While his father negotiated with firm elegance, Timibra stood near the carved threshold, dressed in the layered robes of a Japanese guest, but nothing could hide what he was. He was unlike any man Emi had seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with skin like polished obsidian warmed by firelight. His hair was thick and braided back, his movements quiet, yet powerful. His eyes, dark, sharp, and full of knowing, caught hers suddenly, and did not release them. A slow, respectful bow followed. She realized in the back of her mind that she was holding her breath. And was powerless to release it. They met again the next day, by the koi pond. He spoke careful Japanese, his voice deep and even. "You are daughter of Genbei?" he asked. "I am Emi," she replied, her heart pounding like a taiko drum beneath her silk. "I am Timibra. Your country is beautiful." "It is," she said, then added, "You wear our clothes." He smiled. "My father says, wear the robes of your host. But keep the strength of your own skin." And she saw it, the quiet pride with which he wore the robes, but also the freedom in his stance, the strength in the lines of his arms. He moved like someone who could break a man if he wished, and yet, when he looked at her, there was only gentleness. In the weeks that followed, he returned often, each time lingering longer. He brought her carved beads, foreign fruits, and once, a book of poems from his mother tongue. They spoke in hushed voices, met in garden shadows, hands brushing beneath the wide sleeves of formal dress. When he finally told her he loved her, it wasn't directly. "I have asked my father to ask for your hand in marriage," he informed her quietly under the falling cherry blossoms, her hand in his despite the customs of her people. "I will take you across the sea, if you will come." She said yes. "I understand. Here's the revised and extended version of the paragraph, incorporating your preference for the dramatic escape and hidden journey." Her parents were livid. The moment Emi dared to speak Timibra's name, her father's face turned to stone, his voice like a blade slicing through the air. "You will not shame this family," he thundered, as her mother crumpled beside him, weeping into her silken sleeves. They spoke of bloodlines, of dishonor, of skin too dark to belong. They called Timibra a beast cloaked in civility, his gentleness dismissed, his proud heritage twisted into something vile. When Emi refused to relent, her father did not argue further, he simply ordered her locked in the old storehouse behind the house, bolted shut like a prisoner, her meals withheld to break her will until the foreign ship would leave and her disgraceful fascination would be gone with it. But love, when true, is not so easily starved. On the third night, weak and aching but unbroken, Emi used a broken roof beam to force open the window and climbed out into the dark. She crept back into the house barefoot and silent, her feet like shadows on the wood. In her room, she took only what she could carry, a hair comb of her mother's, a painted scroll from her childhood, and a lacquered box with her name carved into the lid. Then she slipped into the night, her breath tight in her throat, heart pounding like a drum. At the dock, the ship was nearly ready to depart. She waited, hidden among crates until the last sailor climbed aboard. Then, with trembling hands, she pulled herself onto the ship and into the lower deck, hiding behind barrels of silk and cloth traded for African furs and beads. The scent of spice and salt wrapped around her as the waves began to rise. She revealed herself only days later, when the sea was wide and blue and there was no turning back. Timibra had been scanning the waters, perhaps thinking of her, when he turned and saw her, disheveled, thinner, but eyes fierce with purpose. For a moment, he could only stare, the wind stilling between them. Then she stepped into his arms, and the ship sailed on, carrying them both away from rejection and toward a life of their choosing. Sai married within the year of Emi's departure to the eldest son of a prominent Kyoto merchant clan. The wedding was lavish, filled with silks, lacquered horses, and 3 days of ceremony. Sai, clad gold and red, glowed with the pride of triumph. To the world, she was perfection, beautiful, poised, obedient. But behind the fans and beneath the polished smiles, her tongue grew sharper, her temper brittle. Servants feared her, her in-laws grew cautious, and her husband, once proud to have her, began to regret it in silence. But no one dared speak, yet. Far from that world of veiled resentment, another story was unfolding. "You came," he said, stunned. She nodded. "You asked." It was the only answer he needed. He lifted her into his arms, robes and all, and carried her, weak and trembling with hunger, to his father, who he informed of his intentions. Then he took her to his cabin. Behind them was Japan. Ahead, the coast of Africa awaited. The voyage took months, but time passed like breath. On the deck under stars, she told him poems. In the hold, he showed her maps and beads and the plans he had drawn to expand his father's trade. They slept beside each other, curled in a small space with big dreams. When they finally reached the shores of the Benin kingdom, Emi stood at the bow, staring. The city was not what she expected. It was not a wild, unordered land. It was beautiful, different, but deliberate. The city was laid out in wide lanes of compacted red earth, where people and horses moved freely. Sections of the capital were organized clearly, some for residents, others bustling with commerce, markets filled with dried fish, bright fabrics, carved statues, spices, and gold. Outside the city, farms stretched like green quilts over the land. The homes were shaded, many with sloped thatch or smooth clay roofs, decorated with patterns of white chalk, deep red clay, and blackened charcoal, each marking carrying meaning. "It is a city like any I've known," Emi whispered. "Only warmer." At the family enclave, Timibra's father, a dignified man with skin like polished bronze and a quiet authority in every step, embraced her as one of his own. His mother touched Emi's cheek and offered her a necklace made of coral and brass. No one stared at her with contempt. No one asked what color her children might be. Timibra was granted his own manor within the family compound, beside his father's great house. Built of deep red earth with polished floors and a shaded courtyard, the manor felt alive with light and scent, roasted yams, hibiscus, crushed mango. She abandoned the tight stiffness of her Japanese robes for the freedom of the wrapper, its loose cotton folds tied above her hips, her arms bare beneath the warm sun. She learned to move through the market with her basket. She learned the songs of planting. She painted the courtyard walls with soft chalk lines. She bathed beneath the trees and braided her hair in the style of the women who now called her sister. And every evening, Timibra came home, pulling her gently into his arms as if the world had made her for him. Far from where she was born, Emi had found her place, not in geography, but in love. It had been 5 years since Emi had last seen the shores of Japan, 5 years since she had stepped aboard the ship with nothing but her name, her faith in Timibra, and the soft weight of love blooming in her chest. Now, she returned not as a castaway, but as a queen. Timibra's father only sailed to Japan once every 5 years. The journey was long and perilous, skirting coastlines, weaving through trade ports in Southeast Asia, braving storm and stillness alike. This time, he brought not only furs and beads, ivory and carved goods, but also a message which he sent ahead of him to the Nakamura household. "When we were last here, we inadvertently plucked a flower from your garden. We planted it well and it has borne fruit. But we have come to make things right." When Emi stepped down from the ship, wrapped in a kimono made of fine indigo-dyed cloth with gold threaded, her feet touched Japanese soil again for the first time since her youth. Beside her, Timibra held their daughter, 3 years old, radiant and full of life, with large dark eyes and a curious smile that bloomed like sunrise. Her hair was thick and soft, her skin a smooth, glowing brown. She wore a kimono patterned with butterflies, handmade by Emi herself. Emmy was pregnant again, not visibly so, but her body was round and strong with new life. Her skin glowed beneath the summer sun, and there was no shame in her step as she approached the house she once called home. The Nakamura estate had not changed, still proud, still beautiful, still quiet behind its wooden gates and manicured paths. But the air was different when they entered. Her parents received them formally, sitting in the great hall, and their eyes flickered with surprise when they saw the girl, like a little angel, with bright eyes and chubby cheeks, saw Emmy's blooming belly, and saw the man, a boy no longer, whose love had taken her from them and now brought her back. Proudly. But their surprise could not be silenced when the bride price was presented. Laid out across silk mats in the great hall were treasures that rivaled those once offered to daimyo, strings of coral and agate, bolts of embroidered cloth, gold bracelets, elephant tusks carved with stories, lacquered boxes filled with rare perfumes and ivory combs, crates of spices and dried fruit, and a pair of ceremonial robes stitched by Benin's finest. At the center was a carved statue of Emmy herself, her features lovingly captured, her belly round with life, her child at her knee. Gunbei's mouth parted slightly, his composure faltering. "It is excessive," he murmured. Timibra bowed. "She is priceless to me." The gifts were not demanded, only offered, in respect. This was not an apology, but a declaration. And though her mother said little, her eyes welled as she gazed at the granddaughter she had never held. Emmy sat tall in the silence, her daughter Idia sitting beside her. This was not a plea for approval. This was a homecoming on her terms. The Nakamura estate remained still after Timibra and Emmy presented their daughter and the grand offerings. No one spoke of forgiveness, but the weight of 5 years had left its own kind of space. The elders remained formal, bound by habit and pride, but beneath the silence, something began to shift, an unease, quiet but certain. When they came again the next morning, it was for tea. The great room where Genbei received guests opened out onto the inner garden. The breeze was gentle, stirring the pond, and the scent of new lilies hung in the air. Emmy sat gracefully beside Timibra, her daughter curled in her lap, blinking with soft curiosity. She looked every part the granddaughter of a noble house, well-dressed, well-mannered, radiant. Her deep brown skin glowed against the pale lilac of her kimono. Then a voice called out from the corridor beyond. A shrill, high laugh, followed by the patter of small feet. A child burst into the garden. The nanny behind her was breathless, apologizing, bowing, trying to retrieve the girl. But she had already run toward the pond with a delighted squeal, her clumsy wooden sandals falling off one foot. The child turned. Her face was round, her features large, her nose and mouth prominent. Her hair hung in uneven, sparse puffs, roughly combed. Her robe was too short at the ankles, loose at the shoulders. Not unclean, but not fitting for the granddaughter of Genbei Nakamura. Essie entered a moment later, her steps tight, her gaze sharp as a hawk. She looked quickly at Emmy, then at the 2 children. Her daughter was now standing by Emmy, staring in awe at the cousin she had never met, and gently touching the curly mass of hair with her own pudgy hand. "Chio," Essie said flatly, "come here." But the child didn't respond. She was talking to Idia, who was smiling interestedly at her, ready to leave her mother's lap to play. Timibra looked at Emmy, whose lips were pressed into a knowing line. She leaned toward him and whispered, "She looks like our great-grandmother." Timibra raised a brow. "Famous for her wisdom, not her beauty," Emmy added, gently, with no cruelty. "My mother used to say her face could crack mirrors, but her heart healed every wound in the village." Genbei cleared his throat. "She has spirit," he said cautiously. Esai shot him a glare, as if offended by the truth of it. The comparison was not spoken aloud, but it hung in the room like smoke. One child glowed with grace and beauty, unwanted, once cast off. The other, born of the pride of the family, stood there laughing at a fish with her robes misfitting and her spirit wide open. Timibra bowed to Chio, and when she turned her gaze to him, she smiled and waved. He waved back, without hesitation. For a flicker of a moment, even Genbei smiled. And Esai, watching it all, remained silent. Something in her gaze had cracked. That evening, as lanterns were lit and shadows deepened across the Nakamura estate, whispers stirred within the walls like restless spirits. Servants exchanged glances. Old aunties murmured behind folding fans. The truth, long hidden, had begun to unearth itself. Emmy and Timibra were invited to stay the night in one of the guest quarters. Essie had not spoken a word more than necessary, but her silence had grown taut. Her daughter, Chio, had cried when separated from Emmy's girl, reaching out with tiny hands, begging to play longer. But Essie pulled her away, her face unreadable. Later that night, as Timibra rested, Emmy found her mother alone in the kitchen garden, weeding by lantern light, her hands rough with time. "She is lovely," her mother said quietly, not turning. "Your daughter." Emmy didn't answer right away. She stood among the scent of soil and shiso, listening to the insects hum in the stillness. Essay's husband has left her, her mother continued. Took everything. Blamed her, for the girl's face. As if a child chooses. A long pause. "She does not cry," Emmy whispered. "Chio." I watched her fall and smile. "She is strong," her mother said. Stronger than her mother. A silence passed between them, filled with all the words they had never spoken. Then her mother added, "We raised Essay to be perfect. She became brittle instead." "And I?" Emmy asked gently. "You were always soft," her mother replied. "But it seems softness survives better than glass." When Emmy returned to their guest room, she found Timibra awake, holding their daughter close. He looked up with calm eyes. "They're breaking," she said. He nodded once. "Let them. We're not here to hate them. Only to show them what love built." And outside, the garden lanterns flickered, fragile lights, swaying in the dark, but still burning. The next morning, Emmy rose early and dressed her daughter in a fresh kimono, soft pink with cranes stitched in white. The little girl giggled as Emmy combed her hair, wrapping it in delicate ribbons. Outside, the garden was quiet, dew still clinging to the grass, the sky purling with early light. Chio appeared at the sliding door, barefoot and shy. Her robe was newer today, still a touch too big, but lovingly tied. Her nanny trailed behind, then faded away with a bow. Emmy crouched and smiled. "Would you like to walk with us?" The girl nodded, eyes wide. Side by side, the girls wandered through the garden. One tall and poised, the other round and stumbling, both laughing now. Their fingers found each other's, and together they chased butterflies until the sun peeked over the wall. Genbei stood by the porch when they returned. He looked older than Emmy remembered, his shoulders sunken, his hands behind his back like a man weighed down by things left unsaid. "She looks like her great-grandmother," he said softly, watching Chio. "Yes," Emmy answered, voice calm. "And she smiles like her father never mattered." He bowed his head slightly. "We were wrong." They stayed for 2 months until the business season was over, and then prepared to leave. Timibra and Emmy went to say a formal goodbye. Timibra approached then, carrying a small parcel. He placed it before Genbei. "I brought something," he said. "Not from Africa. From our daughter." Inside the parcel was a scroll, a watercolor painting, simple, joyful, of 2 girls in a garden, laughing. Genbei looked at it a long time. His voice, when it came, was strained. "I would like to teach them. Both of them. If you'd allow it." Timibra nodded once. "Idia has many teachers already. But you may be one. I will bring her to visit again when she is older. And perhaps I will bring your grandson along." Genbei was silent and stoic, but his wife, standing beside him, turned her head and could not silence her tears. Essay never came to say goodbye. Pride, perhaps. Or regret. But as they turned to leave the manor, Chio came shyly, her nanny encouraging her this time, clutching a wrapped bundle of sweet rice cakes she had helped to make. She pressed it into Emmy's hands with a fierce little hug. "She's welcome with us," Timibra said. Emmy nodded. "She already is." And so they sailed, the sea wide before them, their daughter nestled between them, dark-skinned, crane-clad, cradled by a love that had weathered exile, scorn, and silence. Not because they had fought to belong. but because they never stopped choosing each other.